This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Mirz Hashem, Motzei Shabbos, according to Minhag Ashkenaz, begin the Yimei HaSlichos. The Motzei Menucha, Kidam Nucha, Tchila, we begin the Slichos, Motzei Shabbos. So we would like to focus on the Tzura of Slichos and the purpose of the Slichos. First of all, the Levush makes a very interesting observation about Slichos. And that is, Slichos concludes with Kaddish, and it's a very unusual Kaddish. It's actually the only time the whole year you say Kaddish with Tiskabel Tzoloisain that's not after Shemona Esrei. Whenever we say Kaddish Tiskabel, it's after Shemona Esrei, obviously because you're saying Tiskabel Tzoloisain V'usain, please accept our prayer. But whenever you don't have an official Shemona Esrei, you never, ever, ever say Tiskabel Tzoloisain, except for at the end of Slichos. And the Levush wants to know, why would you end Slichos with Tiskabel Tzoloisain? Says Levush, V'anachnu lo neda Kaddish Sholem im Tiskabel. Af al gav shebechol yemois Hashanah ino imrim Tiskabel al achat Shemona Esrei. Shekenu mashmois lashon tzoloisain. That's the meaning of the word tzoloisain. Sheperushay tefillah. And what does tefillah mean? Tefillah doesn't mean tehillim. Tefillah means Shemona Esrei. Ustam tefillah ratzon mitzvah Shemona Esrei. Says Levush, this is the fundamental maramakam to understand slichos. You have to understand what is slichos. Slichos was patterned after tefillah. Shani Seder HaSlichos Sheniskanu Kulam Al Seder HaTfilah Shel Kol Hayom. Slichos is created in the image of davening. How's that? Ki HaPsukim Shekoidim HaSlichos Heim Keneged Psuka de Zimra. The Psukim in the beginning of Slichos corresponds to Psuka de Zimra. VeHaSlichos Im HaYud Gimel Midoy Shoimrim Ben Kolachas V'Yachas Heim B'Mokoim Tfilas Yudches. The Yud Gimel Midoys are in lieu of Shemona Esrei. She'ikar hatfilo yud gimel midos. The main slichos are yud gimel midos. That's why you better make sure you have a minyan, otherwise you can't say it. V'yachar kach noiflin al pneim, and then you say tachnon kamayachar kol hatfilos, like after all tfilos, and you end off the tachnon u'masaymin v'anachnu le'neda. L'kach oimrim achareim kaddish sholem im tiskabel. That's why it concludes kaddish sholem with tiskabel. Kamayachar gemar called Tfilos Hashanah, like after all the Tfilos of the year. So Levush is explaining to us the pattern of Slichos. It begins with Psukim, which correspond to Psukim de Zimra. Then you have Yud Gimel Midos Harachamim, which is Shemona Esrei. Then you have Tachnon. Then you have V'anachnu lo neda. Then you have Kaddish Tiskabel with Tiskabel Tzoloisain. Now Likutei Maharich, a Sefer Halacha, he elaborates on this idea of the Levush, and we all know that Slichos begin with what? With Ashrei. Why Ashrei? Well, we want to be able to say Kaddish. Why do we want to start Slichos with Kaddish? Also, why we know there's a halacha that you need to say Yud Gimel Midos Harachamim at least 3 times. Why? So says Likutei Marich, V'hinei Seder HaSlichos. If you want to understand the order of the Slichos, look in the Minhagim, look in the Levush. Shepasech ba'ashrei. You begin with Ashrei. V'hatam, and the reason is Kedei Sheyam Rachak Kaddish, to say Kaddish. Then you say the Psukim L'chashem Atzdaka and the Psukim Shemei Tefillah. Now this is very common in my shul, maybe elsewhere. What if you don't have 10 people when you say Ashrei? So how are you supposed to say Kaddish? You don't. You could say it at any time in the middle of the psukim. As long as you say 3 psukim, then you could say Kaddish. If you don't have 10 people during Ashrei, and then they come later, Yomer Kaddish, you could say Kaddish. Afilu be'emtza psukim, even in the middle of the psukim. As long as you say 3 psukim together with a minyan. Rak sheyomer gimel psukim achar shabo haminyan. Why do we want to say Kaddish before Slichos? Says Likutei Marich, well, based on the Levush, we understand why. Because just like davening, we like to say Kaddish in the beginning of davening, so too we like to say Kaddish in the beginning of Slichos. Slichos is patterned after davening. V'atam shekpidu lemer Kaddish koydem ha-Slichos, efshar al pi ma shekotz v'al Levush, The Slichos niskanu al seder tefillas kol hayom. Slichos is patterned after the tefillah. Shapsukim shekam slichos him connect psuk de zimra. And maybe he says that's why of all psukim, what do we say Ashrei? Because of all of psukim de zimra, who is the chief of psukim de zimra? Ashrei. Ashrei is the king of psukim de zimra. So therefore, if we have to pick something to say in lieu of Psuk de Zimra, representing Psuk de Zimra, we say Ashrei. And the Slichos is connected to Gimel Harachim. And he says in parentheses, maybe that's why you need to say a minimum of 3 Slichos, Keneged, Shachris, Mincha, Mariv, V'achar Kach, Nefilas Apayim, and then Kaddish Teskabel. And before every Tefillah you say Kaddish. And maybe that's why we start with Ashrei, just like we start every tefillah with Ashrei. And therefore he says a big chiddush. We always might have thought that why do we say Ashrei in the beginning of Slichos? It's an excuse to say Kaddish. But what if you don't make it to shul and you're davening Slichos at home? So you might think you don't have to start with Ashrei. You're not saying Kaddish anyway. Says Likud Maruch, no. Ashrei is not just an excuse to say Kaddish. Ashrei is the psuki de zimra of Slichos, so you can't skip the Ashrei. Umitam zen nira gamkein da'av sha'omer Slichos biyachid yesh lemer Ashrei, even if you're not going to say Kaddish, like every tefillah. Okay. Another interesting halacha. I know it never happened to anyone over here, but there are some people in some shuls that I heard about. There's such a thing. People are not there at the beginning of the Slichos. I once heard that sometimes people come a little bit later. So let's say you come a little bit later to Slichos. Should you just jump in right with the tzibur, whatever Slicha they're up to, or should you begin with Ashrei? So in the Sefer Kunsha Shiur Halacha of Rav Shmuel Felder, one of the poskim in Lakewood, he discusses this issue of what do you do if you come late to Slichos. Me, shenes acher ktsas lavai lebeis haknesa. Someone who comes a little late to shul for Slichos. Yesh la'ayin em yomer tchila Ashrei. We need to look into, investigate. Should you first say Ashrei? If you're going to say Ashrei, you're going to lose out saying one of the Slichos. Or should you say a Slicha with the tzibur? So at first glance he says, maybe you would think better to, after all the Slichos are the ikar part, you should jump in with Slichos. He says, no, that's not the right halacha. You should start by saying Ashrei. Why? The reason is based on the levush. Because Slichos is patterned after Tefillah, and Tefillah requires Psuk de Zimra. You have to say Psuk de Zimra. You can't jump in to Berchos Kriyishma. You have to say a minimum of Ashrei. So if you come late to Slichos, even if you're going to lose out a Slicha or two, you must begin with Ashrei. And he said he asked Rabbi Cheskel Roth, and he also concurred that if you come late to shul, this is just academic, no one would ever do that, but if somebody asks you the Shiloh, you'll know, if you come late, you start with Ashrei. Comes Rama, and this really opens up for us an understanding, what is Slichos? I mean, I didn't daven enough, I have to daven more. What am I doing? What's the purpose of Slichos? The Rama writes a halacha, V'yesh mekoymos noyagim shehamispalel slichos mispalel kol hayom. There are some places where the minhag is that the one who davens slichos for the amud, b'moitzai menucha, right? They get to daven the whole day. They get to be the Baal Shachris, the Mincha, and the Achronim bring down an even Marav. And by the way, do you ever see this minhag? In my yeshiva, in Chavetz Chaim, they're makbid gomor. The Baal Slichos davens all the tefillas of the day. Hakbad, Ramah brings it down. Says the Magen Avram, even in our yard site, you push him away. The Baal Slichos davens, not the yard site. It's the biggest chiyuv. Of all the chiyuvim, it's the biggest chiyuv. I know people don't like that, but that's halacha. What can we do? That just shows it's right. Right? Says the Magen Avram, what's the reason for it? Why should the Baal Slichos daven for the Alma the rest of the tefillas of the day? Says the Magen Avram, you ready for this? This is the key to Slichos. Afilu arvis, even Marav he davens. Shehamaschil b'mitzvah oimrim loy gemar. Because if you begin a mitzvah, we say finish the job. And therefore, says my Ram, nearly the Mitamza who koidim la'avel. Even someone ba'avelos. Sorry, pal. I know you really want the Amud. Ula Moyel. You know, there's an Indian, the Moyel down to Amud. Nope, not today. Ula yard site. I don't care if it's the 50th yard site, the 100th yard site, the first yard site. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much herring you brought in that day. You don't daven for the Amud.
Why don't we say during the year that someone who starts saying the Zimra should daven the entire thing, but it's very common they break it up to different yards. If you're starting the mitzvah of davening, that person should daven the entire davening, but we don't do that.
Okay.
Excuse me, the mitzvah of and Slichot, there's a separation of several hours like between Ma'ariv and Slichot.
Well, the question is, which Ma'ariv are we talking about? Are we talking about the Ma'ariv before or the Ma'ariv after? We're talking about the Ma'ariv the next night, or we're talking about the Ma'ariv the night before?
The next night, because you don't know you're going to go out.
That's why should that be the
What?
Like just because you without Slichot.
Why would they obligate you the Ma'ariv before?
No, why should you daven?
Because you started the mitzvah, so we wanted you to finish. The question: what is this svara hamaschel b'mitzvah? Aimim loy gemar.
Sounds fishy.
I have one question: is there any halacha that the Baal Shachar should daven musaf?
No.
Anybody ever see? And there's a halacha the Baal Shachar should not daven musaf. The dafka the Baal Shachar should not daven musaf. You ever see you daven Shachar, so you might as well daven mincha. Mariv the next night. In fact, there's a mitzvah that somebody else do it. Because when it comes to kavod shamayim, like by karbanos, when they gave out, who would bring the Eivarim up to the Mizbeach, they made a raffle. One guy brought the head, one guy the legs, one guy the stomach. Why? Because you want to make a bigger commotion over kavod shamayim. So why is it then, when it comes to tefillos, we split it up? When it comes to karbanos, we split it up. And all of a sudden, slichos, you daven slichos, you got to daven the rest. So this is the question of the Shas is Binyan Shloimeh. Look at number 6. Rav Shloimeh HaKoyen Mivilna, the author of the Cheshek Shloimeh, he writes, Kasa b'Shulchan Aruch, he brings down the Rama, Yesh Mekoymos, Shenogin Shamispal Slichos Misal Kayim, and the source of this halacha is the Kolbai, and the Magen Avram brings in the name of the Magleit Tzedek, that even Ma'ariv, because Maschel b'mitzvah Imrim Loi Gemar. Now the Magen Avram would seem to imply we're talking about the Ma'ariv before. The Ma'ariv afterwards. Otherwise, what logic would it be? Because you began Slichos in the morning, how would that be reason to daven Ma'ariv the night before? You didn't start. I mean, that would be... So the Magen Avram is not to the Ma'ariv later. Prima Gadim says that way, the Machzas HaShekel. But the Eliyahu Rabbah and the Dr. Moshe ask, no, if you look in the original sources, it's referring to the Ma'ariv before. And if you look in the Kolba, he's talking about the Ma'ariv before.
You wouldn't know you were done the next day, though.
However, the Magen Avram seems to say that the reason is Maschel Mitzvah Amr La Gemara, and that would apply therefore to Ma'ariv later. Ask the Cheshek Shloimeh, the Shas Chuz Ben Shon, V'hadavar Tamuali Hafla V'fela. This is a question to me, not just a hafla, but it's a pella also. Okay? Demahu inyan zel hamaschel b'mitzvah. What in the world does it have to do with maschel mitzvah? The hasam. Maschel b'mitzvah means if, let's say, you're in the middle of inviting a guest. So you bring a guest into your house and you say, sit down, and you serve him the food, and then you say, Yankel, I'm not interested in this guy. You spend the rest of the meal sitting next to him. I'm going to go do... If you're in the middle of doing a mitzvah, you complete the mitzvah. Yeah? But there's no halacha that if you start one mitzvah, you got to do the next mitzvah. What does one thing have to do with the other? The maschel mitzvah is in that mitzvah itself. He says, the hasam oising mitzvah achas, if you're in the middle of one mitzvah, tzarech ligmar. Aval hacha mitzvah shehischal kvar gamra. The mitzvah you began was already completed. Umau inyan slichos l'tfilah. And even tefillah itself, atu misha mispal shachris, tzarech l'spal musaf. Is there a halacha that someone who daven shachris needs to daven musaf? Adarabba. The Mishnah is mashma that musaf a dafka second person is mispala, like it says in Rosh Hashanah. The Baal Musaf is takei shofar. And he brings that from the Gemara Tzmasha. Adarabba ikar hamitzvah sheispal acher because of roimam hadras melech. And when the kohanim do the avodah, they would distribute it to many kohanim, so that many people should be zoich in the mitzvah. Like it says in Yuma, Daf Chav Vav Amud Beis, they would make a raffle. Who brings the Eivarim from the Kevesh to the Mizbeach? And the Gemara says it's machlokes Rav Elazar ben Yaakov and the Chachamim. Rav Elazar ben Yaakov says one guy does everything, and the Chachamim say no, you divide it up. And the Gemara asks, what's the reasoning of the Rabbanon? B'roiv am hadras melech. And since we pass on like the Rabbanon, when it comes to karbanos, we like to divvy up the responsibility to make a bigger commotion, even by one mitzvah, because it's covered shamayim that should be done through many people. And we don't say maskal mitzvah im gemar. So since tefillah is b'makam karban, that's why we say the Baal Shachris doesn't daven Musaf, the Baal Musaf doesn't daven Mincha, and so forth. Why should the Baal Slichot daven all the tefillahs of the day? By the way, the Binyan Shlomo has a completely different understanding of this halacha. He understands that Slichos was really looked down upon, and nobody wanted to daven for the Amud. It was like Galila, right? Slichos was like Galila. Imagine if Chas v'Shalom, the Rosh Shiva came into the shul, and you gave some Shnar, Shlishi, or Shisha, and you gave the Rosh Shiva Galila. I don't even know if he would take it, right? But Slichos was worse than Galila. It was like saying opening up the Aron for Adam's Miros or something, right? Nobody wanted to daven Slichos, so they had a reward. The Binyan Shlomo understands they had a reward in order to answer this question. He says the Magen Avraham doesn't have the right reason. It's not maskal b'mitzvah amar gemar. The reason is people did not want to daven Slichos. We had to bribe them. If you daven Slichos for the Amud, we'll give you a big kibbutz. We'll let you daven Shachos for the Amud. But bottom line is, the Magen Avraham says the reason of maschel b'mitzvah. The Magen Avraham was one of the greatest of all the Achronim. By the way, Magen Avraham was so poor that part of the Magen Avraham on Shulchan Aruch, he could not afford paper, so he wrote it on the walls of his house. Avram Gambiner. Magen Avraham says the reason why the Baal Slichos davens all the tefillos of the day of maschel b'mitzvah oimrim loi gemar. So, the Sefer Harei Kedem, which was written by Rav Shorkin, and he writes over Chidushim he heard from Rav Soloveitchik, he says a very wondrous explanation, which really gives us a fundamental understanding of Slichos, and I'm very proud to say that I found this reason in a obscure Rishon, which is the earliest source that I am aware of to this idea. So in the Harei Kedem, he brings down this question. He says, Kfar, in the fourth line, number 7, Kfar Tamu al Zehu Achroinim. Ma shayachacha klal ha'masel mitzvah imle gemar. That klal only applies in one mitzvah itself, you have to finish it. But this here, the mitzvah that you began, you finished. What does Shachris have to do with Slichos? What does Mincha have to do with Slichos? Does the Baal Shachris have to daven Mincha every day? Says Rav Soloveitchik, what do we see from the Magen Avraham? That what is Slichos? We have a new understanding of Slichos. You know what Slichos is? Slichos is a tefillah, Ribono Shel Olam, the Yom Adin is coming, and you're going to judge us on our lives, on our health, on our parnasa, and everything we hope for. And the only thing we have at our ammunition is Shachris, Mincha, and Mariv. Ribono Shel Olam, I daven to you that today you're Makabel my Shachris, that today you're Makabel my Mincha, today you're Makabel my Mariv. It's a tefillah that the tefillos hayom should be niskabel. It's a haschala of all the tefillos hayom. It's not just stam, Rosh Hashanah is coming, we got to do something, so we'll wake up early. We'll torture ourselves. No. Slichos is a tefillah that today the tefillos hayom should work better, should be more effective. He says, V'hanira mavur mizeh, what we see from here, Dechol ikar inyanam shel slichos hu kahakdama v'toisefes l'chol tefillos hayom. It's like an introduction and an addition to the tefillos of the day. V'toisefes hatfilah v'hatachnum shel slichos heim lekabolas kol tefillos hayom. It is in order. Why do we have to daven extra? It's a special tefillah that today's shachar should work. V'heim toisefes shel tefillah ala tefillah. It's in addition to the tefillah. So listen to this. What if a guy says, look, I only have a certain amount of time for davening, so I'll wake up early. But what if I wake up 20 minutes early? I'm out 20 minutes early also. I'll daven Slichos, but I'm not davening Shachris. So it comes out, not only are you not Yotzei Shachris, you're not Yotzei Slichos either. Because you can't have a Hakdama to nothing. If the purpose of Slichos is, Rebbeinu Shem, be Makabel my Shachris, if your Shachris was not good that day, not only do you not have a Shachris, you don't have a Slichos either. You're not Yotzei Slichos. Says Rav Soloveitchik, V'alkein em yashkim adam loymar Slichos, v'yachar kach lo yispal ol oid as called tfilos hayoim. If you wake up early to say Slichos, and you don't say the tfilos of that day, af yidei va Slichos lo yatsa. You're not Yotzei Slichos either. Now we understand the Ramah. That Slichos, since the purpose of them is that it's an adjunct to the tefillos of the day, therefore we could apply the principle of Hamaschal b'mitzvah oimim le'gamar. Slichos is the beginning of Shachris. Slichos is the beginning of Mincha and even Marav the next night. Shachris is not the beginning of Mincha. Mincha is not the beginning of Marav. Slichos is the haschal of each tefillah. Each tefillah stands on its own. Slichos is the introduction to each one. By the way, Soloveitchik says this is the same understanding of Ne'ilah. The Rambam in Parak Aleph of Hilchot Tefillah Hilchot Zayin says that the tefillah of Ne'ilah is a haisafa on the tefillos of the day. In other words, what is Ne'ilah? Ne'ilah is a haisafa of the tefillos of the day. And therefore it would come out l'halacha that if someone did not daven Shachris and Mincha that day, they don't daven Ne'ilah. So I don't know, but what if a woman did not daven anything Yom Kippur and she just wants to come to Ne'ilah? Maybe she could come next year when she could daven Shachris and Mincha. But maybe not that year. Ne'ilah, by definition, it's an extra tefillah. If you didn't daven the first ones, it's not Ne'ilah. It's not an extra tefillah. The whole identity of Ne'ilah is it's a toisefes. It's a haisaf. He even says, Rav Soloveitchik, at least as quoted by the Harei Kedem, said, even if someone just missed one tefillah on Yom Kippur, they can't daven Ne'ilah. Sometimes a person says, I don't have kach to daven Mincha. At least I'll come for Ne'ilah.
So why isn't
Enjoy being home. What?
Why isn't the same Shur Tzuvah? Usually it's not.
For Ne'ilah?
Yeah, you have a different Shur Tzuvah.
This halacha of the Ramah, I'll say like this. The halacha of the Ramah is, usually it's the same Baal Musaf. So usually it's the same as Baal Musaf. It's not a halacha that the Baal Sichas has to daven Shalom Mincha. It's a way of teaching this inyan and what the purpose of Slichos is. So I'm very glad that this idea, which is mavur in the Magen Avram, I found this idea in one of the Rishonim. Look at number 8. And really, I could have just said it first, that the question, and I found the answer. The answer is like this. I don't know. Maybe next time I'll take more credit for it.
So why don't we have some small slichos? If it's haskalah for the davening,
yeah.
How come we don't have some small slichos before mincha, before Ma'ariv? In Ne'ilah we say Ashrei. I mean, but we don't. Mincha.
It's for the whole day. It's the beginning of the day. It's haskalah for the whole day.
But during the week, it's also for the whole day. The slichos.
Yeah. The Leket Yosher. Leket Yosher is a collection of the minhagim of the Baal Trumas Hadeshen, Rabbi Yisrael Isserlin. He starts off by saying like this. He says, he once gave a drasha, and at the end of his drasha he said, Ki chayk li Yisrael, hu mishpat le'lekei Yaakov. Why do we say le'lekei Yaakov? Why not le'lekei Abraham? Why not le'lekei Yitzchak? He says something interesting, that Abraham and Yitzchak were involved in the Akedah. Akedah is Rachamim, and therefore Mishpat is a different idea. But only Yaakov Avinu is connected to Mishpat. Okay, but then he says the following, on the third line. Va'omar Miksas b'nei Adam. He would say, some people, Oimdim l'slichos, number 8, on third line. Some people would get up for slichos. V'achar kach holchem l'tzarchem. They say, look, I get up, I only come to shul, for a week a year, so I'll daven slichos, then I'm out of here. Or you shainim, or they sleep, or they don't come for baruch and kedusha, they just come for slichos. Behem tayim, says the Leket Yosher, they're making a mistake. Ki hatfila b'chol yom ba b'makom hatamid. Shachris, mincha, and mariv is your meat and potatoes. It's the carbon tamid. V'hi ikr, it is more important, yoiser meha slichos. In other words, here, halacha l'mais, you want to know. I could either daven slichos, or I could daven shachris. I could either daven slichos or daven mincha. What's more important? Obviously, davening is more important than slichos. Ki ha-slichos einam ba'im, here we have it, in a Rishon, rak kidei sheyeh hatfila l'ratzon. The purpose of slichos is that your tefillah should be accepted. So here we have already in a Rishon this idea that the purpose of slichos is that the tefillah should be accepted. And he says the mashal is, let's say you have a guest at your table, because you want it to be Mekayim, what we learned today in Gemara Chagiga, that Zeh Shulchan HaShalvnei Hashem, so you have an oireach at your table. What do you do before you serve the main course? You give an appetizer. Yeah? That's what slichos is. It's to whet your appetite for davening. It's to get you in the frame of mind. It's that to appease the Rivan Shalom to makabel your tefillah. And therefore, you can make the case that if you don't daven the ikar tefillah, not only are you not yotze the ikar tefillah, you're not even yotze the slichos. Let us see one more maramakim on the sheet.
Rabbi, does this apply also to the slichos that we say for the Tanesim? I mean, we have slichos for Tanesim. There, maybe it's a different mindset in terms of, before Yom Naram, you want to Kadosh Baruch Hu to accept your tefillos. It's the time of din, but we say slichos. Sorry.
Yeah.
We say Hashem Hashem Kelchan.
You want to know if slichos during Tanesim are for the same purpose? I don't know, maybe. Okay, let us discuss why do we begin Slichos Matzai Shabbos. Well, we know there has to be a minimum of 4 days, because to check a carbon from a mum, you need a minimum of 4 days, and Rosh Hashanah is like a Hakravas HaKarban. So why Shabbos? Start Sunday night. After all, Sunday is a day off. It's a good day. How do we pick Matzah Shabbos?
We just came out of
Anyway, people say they can't fall asleep anyway, so it might as well come for slichos. That's what some Rishonim say.
He just came out of a mindset of being closer to Kadosh Baruch Hu because you have Shabbos.
Really?
So if you want to be in the right frame of mind...
So why... Some Rishonim say that it's just a matter of convenience. That you need 4 days, and you have to make a set day every year, so you start at the beginning of the week.
Don't the Spartans start from Rosh Chodesh Elul?
I can't take responsibility for them.
We have more things to ask a Kodesh. I went over to start for
the second day, not on
what?
Huh? When?
The second day.
Look,
Secondly, okay, it was a lot closer than...
they get to eat rice on Pesach, so you know. Okay, so the Lekeh Yosher, the Shumas Hadeshen, says very interesting reason why we begin Slichos Matzai Shabbos, and that is V'yesh loymar la'olam oimdin b'yom rishon. Third line. We always begin on Sunday. Mishum shu samach l'Shabbos. And what's special about Shabbos? Everybody knows. What's the purpose of Shabbos? During the rest of the week, you don't have time to learn. Even if you learn 2 hours in the morning, very nice. But it's not like you could learn like 8 hours. But Shabbos, you can learn the whole day. And therefore what? V'noah kol adam, every human being, l'mod b'Shabbos. Everybody learns on Shabbos. B'chein hu b'yamav. That's what happened in the days of Shumas Hadeshen. Mishum de'ein la'adam asakim. People have nothing else to do. By the way, Rabbeinu B'chaye brings down, David HaMelech says, Ma ahavti Torah secha, I love your Torah so much. Kol hayoim hi sichasi. All that day, that's all I talk about. Says Rabbeinu B'chaye, what's all that day? That day is Shabbos. On Shabbos, that's what I do all day. And maybe that is why we begin Kabbalah Shabbos with the words Hayoim and B'Kalei Sishmo. Today, if you listen to my voice, because the main responsibility of Shabbos is to have time to learn. And therefore, what? And the mashal is that when Klal Yisrael came into Eretz Yisrael, the Torah began to mourn. It put on sackcloth. Because the Torah said when Klal Yisrael were in the Midbar, they had nothing better to do, they would learn Torah. But now everyone's going to go and do business and plant their vineyard. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, you know what? This is analogous to somebody who had no ben zug, Sunday's Ben Zug was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Shabbos had no partner, and the partner of Shabbos is the Torah. Don't worry, even when they go into Eretz Yisrael and they work the whole week, they'll learn on Shabbos. So therefore what? What does that have to do with Slichos? Lekach toiv lahaschal b'yom aleph, because on Motzei Shabbos, people are in a good mood. Why are they in a good mood? Ki ha'am smeichim machmas mitzvahs haTorah shem loimdim b'Shabbos. People are in a good mood Motzei Shabbos. Why? Because even if they wasted the first 6 days of the week, at least they were productive on Shabbos. The whole reason we start Slichos Motzei Shabbos is because that's the day, a time of the week you're in the best mood. Why? Because you just learned more than any other time. So that's a big responsibility. That's the way it's supposed to be. And also, Einik Shabbos, look, you could sleep a little bit also, you eat a little bit more, and the Shechina is not shoira on a person out of laziness or sadness, only from simcha. And therefore, Slichos begins mitoich simcha shel mitzvah of limud haTorah b'Shabbos. So let's just end off with the following. One of the most powerful lines of the Slichos are Loi b'chesed, Loi b'masim, Banu lefanecha, Kedalim u'cherashim, Dafaknu dilasecha. Now with kindness and now with ma'asim tovim do we come before you, Hashem. Like paupers, like beggars, we bang down your doors. What does that mean? What does it mean we come before the Rebbeinu Shalom like beggars, like paupers? So the simple explanation is that we don't have the chutzpah to come before the Rebbeinu Shalom and say, Rebbeinu Shalom, I deserve a good year. I earned it. I'm entitled to it. I did so many mitzvahs this year. I'm a good guy. No, we say, Rebbeinu Shalom, we're begging for it, like somebody begging for tzedakah, like someone begging for charity. As Chazal tell us, Kol shana sherasha b'tchilasa misasheres b'soifa. That the most important attitude to have during the Yom Noram is an attitude of humility, an attitude of unworthiness. That is the frame of mind one should have during the Yom Noram. Ke'ani hamavakesh b'Pesach, like an ani who's not asking because out of entitlement, an ani who's asking, he's begging, he's asking for a freebie, for charity. That's the simple meaning of the words kedalim ucherashim dafaknu d'lasecha. Rav Shlomo Hyman would say over in the name of his Rabbi, the Granat, Hagoyin Rav Naftali Trop, that Rav Naftali Trop would say a little bit differently. What does it mean? Kedalim ucherashim dafaknu d'lasecha. And that is, sometimes, as this time of the year approaches, in the back of our mind, we feel very comfortable. Because we say to ourselves, look, we made money this year, and we were healthy this year, and we were alive this year. Chazaka. Status quo. We presume things will remain the same. Why will they change? But, says Ugranat, when Rosh Hashanah comes, all bets are off. The lease is up. The lease is up. Whatever was last year has no bearing on what the new year will bring. Past performance has no indication of future outcome. The lease is over, and the lease needs to be renegotiated. Even if you have $1 million in your bank account, even if you're of perfect health, but you come before the Rebbeinu Shalom, kedalim ucherashim, as if you have nothing, and you need to ask again for everything that you hope for. And this is also a very important attitude of Loi b'chesed v'loi b'masim banu lefanecha kedalim ucherashim dafaknu d'lasecha. In fact, I'll tell you a kasha of Rav Eisel Charif. Rav Eisel Charif in the Emek Yeshua asks a very powerful question. He asks, why do we get so hung up on Rosh Hashanah? Everyone gets so scared about Rosh Hashanah. Big deal. The Gemara says in Masechet Rosh Hashanah Daf Tezayin, Rabbi Yossi Omer Adam Nidain B'chol Yom. Rabbi Yossi says there's a judgment every day. So what's the big deal about Rosh Hashanah? Says Rav Eisel Charif, the rest of the year, a person's judged every day, but there's a certain chazaka, there's a certain presumption, a certain status quo. The way things were, they'll probably continue that way unless the Rebbeinu Shalom needs to make an adjustment. And every day the Rebbeinu Shalom makes a judgment. Do we need to adjust the chazaka? Comes Rosh Hashanah, there are no chazakas, and there are no presumptions, and there's no status quo, and there's nothing. The lease is over, and the lease needs to be renegotiated. And that is why Rosh Hashanah is Yom Hadin Hagadol, the Hanoira, because we literally stand before the Rebbeinu Shalom, Kedal Mucharashim, Pshutoi, Kemashmai. We don't have anything, and we ask the Rebbeinu Shalom to be Choynein us, B'matnas, Chinam, we shall be Zoichet to Ksiva V'Chasima Torah.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.